Hi, everyone. This is Channing Dutton, part of the team that brings you the 3 Degrees podcast. And along with my co hosts, David Thorson and Chris Cloninger, we want to bring you a breaking news story. We don't do this often, but we certainly did it with the passing of Pope Francis. And we want to talk about an event that has happened today. You're going to see it on the news later this evening. It's going to be discussed and it's significant. And that is, we've had another event in Alaska that has placed the community of Juneau, Alaska on flood alert. And I'm going to tell you the lead right now. It's climate change. So let me jump to David and let him start introducing what has been going on up there every August and talk about what happened today.
Yes, I happened to be sailing up in Alaska a couple of years ago in 2023, and we had finished crossing the Gulf of Alaska, I might add, in the warmest ocean waters ever recorded in human history as we know it. And we had finished our sailing, and we flew by float plane over to Juneau, and that same time we were flying, the river flooded and took a whole bunch of homes out in Juneau, Alaska. And it was because a glacier had receded and a pool formed, and it overtopped the pool and flooded Juneau, Alaska, and caused a horrible problem. This has been happening now since 2011 because of climate change and the smaller glacier receding. And now it seems to be flooding every year, even though human efforts have tried to stop it. It keeps overtopping what we can try to engineer out of this. So this is very typical of what's happening with climate change around the world. I know that, Chris, you have some further comments about this also.
Yeah, glacial lake outburst. So that's what you described, David, as that meltwater builds up. Ice creates dams. And once there's enough weight, that dam will burst. And this is a great video, Channing, that you found of the loop of the water building underneath the ice. You can see it rise and then a lot faster. Look at how quickly it begins to drop. And that is what we saw. And as David mentioned, last year it flooded, or a couple of years ago it flooded. And this has pretty much been an annual occurrence when you have that much glacial melt. It builds up. Again, the weight becomes too much, and then that dam breaks and it floods everything downstream. And in this case, it broke the record that was just set last year. If you scoot in and look at about 16.85 feet, the old record was right at 16 feet. So we surpassed that by about a half a foot. And if you look at the historical crests, last year, again, almost a week to the day, and then the year before that, we had a crest at 15.99 feet, which they rounded to 16 feet. That was the record going into this event that just occurred. And then before that, the year prior, almost to the exact day, 14.97 feet on August 5th, 2023. And even though this is a fairly recent tide gauge, they've been, when it comes to water level, they've been looking at flow. And we've hit peak flow records as well of just how much water's flowing through the Mendenhall Glacier. And if you're unfamiliar with it, you can kind of see the glacier here. This was a trip that I took and was able to fly in on the glacier. And you can see just how vast it is. I mean, as far as the eye can see, and it kind of winds its way through the valley. And it goes from ice right into the Mendenhall River. And that Mendenhall River flows right through downtown Juneau. And there are neighborhoods that are affected when it does flood. And when you have that surge of water, and it isn't it's not a gradual increase like we typically see with like the Mississippi River, for example. It comes up slowly. People have time to prepare for it. And usually the water increase is relatively gradual, but this isn't the case. It comes similar to a storm surge. And I don't mean to keep you on camera for this graphic, but it's a vertical shot, Channing, but this is the map that you saw from the Juneau Empire of the inundation, the possible inundation, if there was to be flooding with the with that burst, that dam burst. And pretty much that is what we're seeing across the western side of the city of Juneau.
And the three of us are not, we're not, excuse me, the two of us are not professional TV presenters or meteorologists. Chris obviously is, but this is the story that you're not going to get. This has been happening practically on the same day, year after year after year, and the numbers are getting bigger and bigger. This chart's going to have to be rebuilt to take into account 2025. And Chris, when we come back to you, I want you to talk about the combination of forces that leads to this. But we see this locally. This is happening in Iowa, where we have a terrible event. We think we take the right steps, and they turn out to be the wrong steps. And David, you were sharing as we were prepping. Tell us about Northwest Iowa and the flooding there. Was it two springs ago?
Just last year.
Just last year. Remind the viewers what happened.
Yeah, last year we had horrific flooding here in Northwest Iowa, and a town north of here, Rock Valley, on the Little Sioux River, Big Sioux River, Little Sioux River, both flooded. And they had flooded just a few years ago, so they decided to rebuild their levee, and they built it a few feet higher than the all-time record flood, which happened just a few years ago. And guess what happened last year? The flooding overtopped that record by 6 feet, completely flooded the community and went downstream and flooded Spencer and many other communities along the way. And it just goes to show you that we can try to engineer our way out of the climate crisis, but until we do something about fossil fuels and greenhouse gases accumulating in the atmosphere to stop this from happening, our human efforts are just going to go by the wayside as we just completely get overwhelmed by these circumstances.
Chris, let me just jump in one thing to follow up with what David said. If the people of Rock Valley 5 years ago would have been told, you don't want to build your next levee 4 feet higher than the previous record, you want to build it 15 feet higher than the previous record, you would have been laughed out of the room. And yet right now in Rock Valley, they're talking about going even higher than that 15 feet that they should have built in the past. And David, you get the last word on this, but this is the folly of we think, well, what just happened is the worst that could ever happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we keep talking about this is the coolest summertime that we're ever going to experience again in our lifetimes. And we talk about 500-year floods and 1,000-year floods and rainfalls, but we keep getting these 6, 10, 14-inch rainfalls. They just got a 14-inch rainfall in the Milwaukee area that caused tremendous flooding there, and canceled their state fair in Milwaukee. And these circumstances just keep happening where we keep getting record rainfalls. We have glaciers receding. That creates problems with other pooling water events like this, Chris. And we can't engineer our ways out of this. So we're going to have to collectively, as people, have the discussions about ending fossil fuel use and doing this transition. And instead of our world leaders meeting in Anchorage to discuss ending a war, maybe they should be talking about climate change and doing something about that as the lead story instead of what they will be discussing.
Yeah, and you bring up Milwaukee. My wife just joined me and my folks here on Long Island, but her family and friends hit directly. One experienced significant damage to their home, hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses as the Milwaukee River overflowed its banks. And if you look at how quickly it climbed, it went from 2 feet, which is pretty average during the summer for its water level, up to nearly 12 feet in a matter of an hour. And they were not home at the time, this one particular friend, and they came home to total devastation. And what they learned after the fact was the road in front of their house literally turned into the Milwaukee River. and water levels quickly rose. And there's no way to really, thankfully, it doesn't appear that there was any loss of life with any of the flooding in the Milwaukee area. But it's not something that you can evacuate an entire major metropolitan area for. And I think that's what people really need to have, that realization. You can be completely caught off guard, even if the forecasts are 100% accurate, and you're going to see impactful weather. You can't evacuate an entire metro area like that. You shelter in place and you just pray that the water doesn't come high enough. And we need to have conversations of where people can build and where they rebuild, and where you go afterwards, because these disasters are just going to be happening more and more frequently. And the case up in Anchorage, if you look at the headwaters of the Mendenhall River, the climate shift index was a 4, so 4 times more likely because of climate change. While it may not be an incredibly warm day in Juneau, across the glacial part of that region, it was extremely warm going into this event. And that is what really was the catalyst to help the dam break and melt water over the last several weeks.
Chris, I'm not sure that we had a chance to talk about this yet, but I'd like you to address it. And that is, the early reports are also saying that rainfall has played a role in what happened with Mendenhall Lake and pushed the floodwaters down into the Mendenhall Valley. But just for our viewers, connect the dots here a little bit about the role that rainfall and the temperature is playing to produce these results year after year after year.
Yeah, they did have rainfall. In fact, it appeared that they had about an inch of rain on the 11th. So preceding this event, there's just more water than just the glacial melt. And when you have water standing on glaciers, it loses its reflective capability. Its albedo is lower, and that means it absorbs heat. So it's kind of this vicious snowball effect where you have water on top of ice. That water heats up and is a lot more efficient at melting that water. So it increases the pace of melting that's occurring. So you can kind of see how it just goes from bad to worse when you have rainfall on top of that, but also the melt sitting on top of that glacier. And that water is obviously, it's above the freezing point. So anything above freezing will contribute to melting. And that's exactly what we saw happen in Juneau.
Well, again, we're doing this as breaking news, and this is going to be available. Some of you may be able to see this even before you get to the evening news. But as we've talked about, this story is playing out in Iowa. This story is being witnessed by David when he's in a plane just flying into Juneau. By Chris. Chris is there taking pictures of exactly what's going to be the news story, but the news continues everywhere. Epic heat in Spain. The south of France is embroiled with the heat and temperature. They're now reporting that they think in Maricopa County, Arizona, up to 400 people have died in the last 30 days from the intense heat, where they're averaging basically 111 degrees. And they're going to break the record there heat-wise that they set a year ago. And so the drumbeat continues. And at least to this lawyer, it is only a matter of when are we going to wake up. And David, I'll flip it to you for a goodbye. But I love your idea about maybe Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump need to talk about something other than their next business dealings when they're in Anchorage.
Absolutely. You got two world leaders there, and you're looking at the Siberian Arctic in Russia, the opening of the Northern Sea route because of loss of ice. You're looking at Alaska, arguably the most altered state in all of the 50 states of the United States because of what's happening so quickly with climate change in the north. And that whole northern slope has warmed to, I don't know, maybe 7 degrees Fahrenheit over average temperature in the summertime and even winters too. So we're seeing a fast changing region up there. And this should be a place where our leaders are meeting for a climate summit, not to talk about ending a war, which obviously needs to be stopped. But remember that making war uses a lot of fossil fuels. And so making peace is really good for stopping climate change and burning less fossil fuels. The war machine causes a lot of pollution around the world. So I guess on this day, we all just need to understand that the real breaking news around the world should be climate change and what's happening to our planet right now.
Yep. All right, everyone.
Chris, you get the final word. What do you see? What's the headline tomorrow, Chris?
I think there's going to be more fires across parts of Europe as Europe heats up. You know, I have a colleague who, for my full-time job, which is based in Toulouse, France, they said the heat and the drought is so extensive that buildings are literally starting to crumble and are becoming structurally unsound. These are buildings that have stood the test of time, and I mean, truly remarkable architecture from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And it's not keeping up. They're not keeping up with this kind of heat. You know, the Bordeaux region of France, the wine producing region of France, grapes cannot thrive in this kind of heat. And I think that's going to be a pretty big story in the coming weeks and months. Our wine prices that are soaring, and perhaps some of your favorite wineries going under across parts of France because of the extreme heat. So we'll be watching that story too as we go. But thanks everyone for joining. Yes,
wait, one more, Chris, while we got you. You know, Hurricane Aaron is churning away in the Atlantic. What's the Gloninger prediction? Are we gonna see a landfall in the US, or is it gonna curl away?
Yeah, we call it a fish storm. Yeah, we think it's going to safely stay out to sea, but I think the East Coast still needs to be vigilant and watch it closely. But at this point, all models show the storm staying out to sea, but could be some pretty big waves. And we're entering into a period as we get into the fall of some really high tides with rising sea level and also astronomically high tides. Some years we see more than others, and this is a year that we see a lot of those high tides. So I think we're going to see a lot of East Coast flooding over the course of the late summer and into the fall. And any storm that even comes close, I think, could cause worse flooding. Remember, you have that fetch across the ocean as the winds blow over the ocean unobstructed for hundreds and not thousands of miles. That water builds up, so it doesn't take a landfall to have impacts, especially if those impacts happen at a high tide. So we'll be watching that closely.
Thank you all.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you shortly.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.